but otherwise we're going to record.
Yeah, we'll get started here. So, welcome everyone to the second part of our series about making your OKRs work in the real world. So just before we start, my name is Alex. I'm with Wayne. We're both OKR coaches. We have Maria, who is our admin for today. So we're part of Zodiac. We are a Go partner with the OKR Institute, and so we've worked with organizations from startups to global enterprises to help get their OKRs right. And hopefully today we're going to answer a question that a lot of companies are asking of how do they move the needle properly? So let's go on to the next slide. Yeah. I'll introduce myself first. So my name's Alex, like I was saying. I'm a senior business process engineer at Zodiac. I've been here for just over a year. I've worked in startups. I've been a business analyst at some big and small tech companies, and I'm an MBA alumni. I've been working in the like a lot of different industries for many, many years. In healthcare for over 10 plus years, loan origination, retail, and technology. And I can see that OKRs are really there to help people uh, move towards where they want to be. Oh, and to you, Wayne.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Wayne Hetherington. Been working in the Toronto area for quite some time. Have a background in coding. Moved into the agile space, and as I work with Zodiac now as their VP of operations, we see quite a few clients who struggle with OKRs. Really great idea. I think it works well when it's done right, but it's one of those things that's easy to say, a little harder to do. So we're seeing a need to help out people with how they use OKRs. So that's what we're going to talk about today, right, Alex?
Absolutely. So we'll just go a quick agenda. So we're going to talk about first about the problem, go over what companies are going through, what teams are going through, then talk about how we can use OKRs to help you get there, and then how we're going to talk about techniques and methods, and then we're going to talk about real world examples, and then finally also talk about how do you say no, because we find that's a little bit very difficult when things come up to companies, and we see this as a constant thing that we see with our clients. And then finally, we're going to go through a conclusion and then a quick Q&A. One thing to note, if you can stay to the end, I know people have a busy schedule. We're going to have a quick survey that we're doing worldwide that we work with the OKR Institute on, and you get a chance to win a ticket to the OKR Summit, it's an online summit. You get to meet lots of people, and it's a great way to connect.
Okay,
On to
so
you.
let's frame up the problem here. What is it we're talking about? Well, we see this problem happen in lots of organizations, and you've probably seen it in yours as well. That teams are really busy, they're working hard, they're doing a lot of things, but they still don't see a lot of progress. Sometimes this is called busy work, where we're just doing things for the sake of keeping busy. But often there's more than just, trying to keep busy. We're doing things that we think are important, and we're really trying hard at it. But it just doesn't seem to get us a little further than we would like to. We also see problems where there's huge amount of demand and it outstrips our capacity. It's this feeling like there's always so much to do and we can just never get through it. Some teams have backlogs of product ideas that are years long, and they know there's no way they're ever going to make it. So they start to feel stuck. They feel like they can't make progress, that they're always running and never really getting anywhere. So maybe you felt this in your organization. Some organizations, sort of an additional thing that kind of happens, they realize this is going on and they think, well, let's try to align everybody, make sure that we're working towards something that actually gives us progress. And they'll use objectives and key results framework as a way to get people aligned and focused on the right thing, which is a good idea in thought, but they run into a problem because they have their OKRs disconnected from the everyday work, the real work that's going on. So they've got this extra kind of thing on top of a thing. It's a frame. They've got this framework, but it's not really serving the purpose properly. So I don't know if you've seen that in your organization we'll have just a little bit of interaction here with everybody. If you're using OKRs in your organization in name only, but you rarely see them actually used in everyday work, put up your hand. Yeah. How many people have used OKRs but rarely see them? Okay, there's a little bit of that going on. Um, okay, so Alex, have you seen this happen in the real world?
Definitely. And I think we've seen them at, a couple of companies. We worked with a startup called Sweet Justice. And they were trying to use them and they were having difficulties with using it. It's really small team, but they had like so many, like we talked about in our prior webinar where we talk about having too many objectives is bad, but this also comes to the point is that they had troubles working towards their goal. And I think you've seen it too, right, Wayne?
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with lots of organizations that try to use OKRs. One that particularly comes to mind, they spend a fair bit of time and workshopped a good set of OKRs, but it didn't really go much beyond the workshop. They had this beautiful set of OKRs that just kind of sat there afterward, and we didn't really feel that they were getting the full advantage of all this work that they put into it because it really didn't influence what they were working on further down the line. So, yeah, this is a common problem, and that's why we're talking about it today. Um, Alex, why is this so important?
Yeah, definitely. I think we've seen that OKRs are that strategic filter that filters out what's not important. So you want to focus on what is important. And why is that important, you may ask? It avoids a lot of the busy work. So you want to avoid working on things that don't produce outcomes. Outcomes are things that are really working towards your company objectives that are valuable. By keeping using RKRs, you're keeping your team's focus and aligned towards a common goal. A lot of the time we see is that teams are misaligned or they're working on different things. Picture like a circle, things are going in different directions. You're not moving in the same direction. So if you aligned everyone, you're really making an effort. You're not having people that are conflicting. You're moving in one direction. It is very much more productive and much more valuable to the company. Avoid wasting time resources on low impact projects. And you want to be focusing on the things that produce the most value, the most return on investment. So you avoid that situation. And it's a really great decision framework. Sorry, really great decision framework. And it's your strategic filter. So let's see how it's done. Back to you, Wayne.
Okay. So, yeah, I think we're going to come up with two suggestions today about how you can make your OKRs more effective for you. And the first one is probably the most, well, both of them are important, but I think the more important one is making sure that your OKRs stay connected to your everyday work. And that was the problem that we saw at one of our other clients. Again, they went through this great workshop. They came up with a very nice list of objectives. It was right size. They had a few measurements in there, but they just didn't use them. So the very first and foremost important thing to do is make sure that your OKRs are connected to your everyday work. So just to get an opinion here of what you see out in the wild, if you're using OKRs, I'd like to take a little poll from everybody. How often do you see the OKRs used in your organization? And maybe you could just jot it down in the chat window here. Do you see weekly, daily, maybe per sprint, per quarter? Are they only used annually or at some other point? How often do you see OKRs in your organization? Get out the chat window here. Okay, sounds good. So we go to a couple monthly. Yes. Some people use them fairly often, but what one of the things I've seen is that organizations will treat this as a quarterly exercise. So they'll begin a quarter by setting some goals, which is a great way to start off your quarter. But often they get buried in a spreadsheet somewhere or perhaps put into a tool. And then they rarely get looked at through the quarter until we get to the end. And then at the end of the quarter, do a little review, see how far we've gotten. And we may have totally forgotten what the goals were, or we may have strayed considerably in the 3 month period away from the objective. And it's almost a little too late to catch up because we've taken too much time. And really, honestly, Alex, this is where most OKR implementations fail. It's a great way to set priorities for our work, but they're only going to serve us if we use them regularly. It doesn't do any good to go to the trouble of setting a series of objectives and then losing them in a spreadsheet somewhere. So, number one tip, make sure your OKRs are connected to your everyday work. So, what would be the next thing?
Yeah, let's talk about a real example of what you talked about. So, um, in this situation, well, we had a client in a major financial institution. They had a project to improve 300 plus internal processes. And the part of the project was to look at ways to use AI to analyze and automate their processes. So, Wayne, consider what you just talked about. How did you go about helping? How did we go about helping them, or what did they do in this situation?
Yeah, so you can imagine the sort of the overwhelming nature of this project, Alex. You got 300 or more processes. You're tasked with the idea of improving them and making them better. But which one do you start on? You know, we figured the team had capacity for three, maybe four processes at any one point in time, and they couldn't do more than that. So you got 300 or more to choose from. Which ones do you choose? So it was very much this demand outstrips capacity situation,
Hmm.
and you could easily become overwhelmed by it, or you could spin your wheels, and you could be working on ineffective things. So what we did first of all was to try to plan out what what was important for the program to accomplish. Why did we want to improve these processes? And we started making a list of the different things, the objectives that we wanted to reach. And one of them was cost reduction. We also had some processes were very error prone. So we had a quality metric. We wanted low failure rates. We also had some processes that were heavily human interactive. So it required a lot of people to do the process. It was manual. So one of the things was trying to automate and reduce the touch points for humans. And a speed was another one. So some of the processes were very long and drawn out. They would take days to accomplish. Others were faster, but if we used automation, we could speed them up considerably and it would go faster. So those were some of the important objectives that we wanted to reach.
Hmm.
And then, yeah, that once we set the objectives, now you think, okay, we set these objectives, now we'll put them in a spreadsheet somewhere and go and do a bunch of stuff without thinking about them. That's where it would have broken.
Yeah. And what kind of outcomes did you see after going through this? And how long did it take for them to go about getting there?
Well, that's where it got interesting because we tried to keep the OKRs connected to the everyday work, and we did that primarily by bringing the objectives into every planning meeting. So every time we sat down and we planned and we thought, what are we going to do next? What's most important next? We would bring out the list of objectives and we could compare that. So in practical terms, what it looked like was a list of the 300 or more processes. And we would take a look, well, what's most important? Do we want to save money first? Do we want to make things less error prone first? Do we want to reduce the number of people involved first? And usually it was a bit of a combination because here's an interesting twist that we found out later on was there was an onshore team and an offshore team. The onshore team was more expensive than the offshore team. So by reducing the number of people in a particular area, we could also reduce the cost. So we saw there's interconnectedness between the objectives, which made it even a little more complex. But once we decided, okay, our cost is the biggest problem that we want to solve, then it became pretty easy. We'd just go through the list and look at the most costly processes, and we'd fix the most expensive one first.
Hmm.
So it made prioritizing the backlog of work real easy once we had the objectives in place.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think one thing from that process, from the whole thing that you worked with, is that the teams felt so relieved after having done it. They felt, I think I saw in people's eyes, they were smiling, people were enjoying themselves better. I think the moral like the of the team was much higher afterwards. Would you agree that?
Yeah, I think they really felt like they were accomplishing something good because when we finished a process, we could actually have some measurements. Oh, all right, we saved X number of dollars, or this process, which used to take 4 hours, now takes 20 minutes, and we had those measurements. So we um, displayed those proudly along with our objectives. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's what we've actually done. Look how great we've done. We've really come close to it. And yeah, the team was real happy with it. But that wouldn't have been possible, Alex, without making sure that those objectives were in front of everybody's face all the time. They could see it. They could see the results. We had it posted up on the board. Every planning meeting, that was the center of the discussion. And in every review, we looked at the numbers. So really, it really helped out.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I think that's a great example. And I think it ties into our next topic, which is how to say no. Wayne, do you want to go through this a bit?
Yeah, sure. So we've talked a little bit about how we might use OKRs as that strategic filter. We're going to use them to set the priorities. And we always think about taking things that are a higher priority and then bubbling them up to the top of the list so that we're making sure that we work on the most important things first. But you can also use this same principle in reverse. So if an OKR can be used to decide when a piece of work is important, it can also be used to decide when a piece of work is not important. So this uh, naturally leads us to the point where we have a way to start to say no to unimportant work. And I'd like to just ask participants here, have you had work get pushed on you, maybe from a manager or a department somewhere, and you thought, this doesn't make sense. I should probably say no to this work. What kind of work have you seen that you think you should have said no to? And that's a bit of a head scratcher. It might make you think for a few minutes, but if you come up with an example, please share it in the chat window. A piece of work that you wish you could say no to. So as you're thinking about that, let's talk a little bit about how that might actually work in the real world. So we have a backlog of work. We have some work items described in there. There's a project or a piece of work or a functionality that has been asked for, and it really doesn't make sense. You should say no to it. Here's how you would do it. As you're in your planning meeting and you have your objectives in front of you and you have the KRs, the numbers that you're trying to move, use the conversation to help you determine why the piece of work is unimportant. So you ask this question: this piece of work, what objective will it get me closer to? If you can't answer that, then the work is not connected to your goals, and you should probably be saying no. If you can connect it to an objective, a second question is, what number will move when I do this work? So, of course, the idea is to select work that gets you closer to your goal and has a measurable result. If you can't quantify that, if you can't state that clearly in a sentence, then you should be questioning the work. So now, if it's obvious that the work will not support an important goal, maybe it's just the manager's pet project, or maybe it's a weird customer demand that has only come from one customer and you think you have to do it. Maybe you should say no. If it's not important, then use the OKR to deprioritize that piece of work. Does that make sense, Alex?
No, absolutely. Saying no is such a hard thing. I see, like we can see when clients, we work with teams. How do you say no to your boss that's telling you, you got to do this, you got to do that? And I think OKR is a great way. Well, does it? You can ask your boss, like, does it go towards the objectives that we agreed on? And it's kind of like a barrier to prevent conflict because people they have agreed at objectives. Well, they think about it. Well, it's not really. So, okay, I'm not gonna. They can make a decision based on what you're kind of asking them, and asking them questions kind of diffuses any kind of conflict when you're trying to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because in the LinkedIn post just this week, we ran a little survey, and one of the comments in there was that it's hard to say no, especially when your boss asks you to do something because you feel socially compelled to do what you're asked to do, and especially if the manager asks, you don't want to say no to your manager. So we were thinking that this may give a framework where we could have a discussion about what makes sense to do and what doesn't. Not that you're being contrary or trying to create conflict by saying no, but if the work really doesn't make sense to do, how do you discuss that? This might be a good way to do it.
Absolutely.
Um, okay, so we're getting up towards the end now.
Yeah.
We have a question in the chat. What's the question there, Alex?
It's a question. Um, what happens when the executive is not open to being challenged? Where asking questions is turning the exec defensive.
Hmm. Okay,
Hmm.
so that and that is that's the social challenge of the whole thing, isn't it? Um, we're gonna open this up to general questions and answers in just a second, but how could we answer this question, Alex?
Yeah,
The man.
so I think I was pointing towards is like pointing like if you have the OKRs always transparent and visible, you could like instead of maybe usually when you have executive, you have different levels of projects. Like depending on the company, maybe a different level of meetings, and you can always bring up. You can always mess depending on your culture too. Maybe it's appropriate to if they're messaging you, you can also message them, just letting them know. Other ways is through ranging meetings with them to talk about these things. And if you're not comfortable, possibly your own direct supervisor, you can talk to them and try to um, talk to them about it and affect the decision of the executive. There's multiple ways to do it. So having those kind of conversations is important for sure. And using the OKRs as the platform, I think makes it so that because they were the ones that kind of driving the conversation. The OKRs are driving that kind of goal in mind. You can use that as that way to kind of talk about it.
Yeah, and I think if you've got a framework of events set up where everybody gets together to do the planning, we talked about keeping your OKRs connected to the everyday work, and then having set places at which you consider the OKRs. So if you go into your planning meeting, you've got the objectives that we've all agreed on up on the board, and we've got some numbers on it. We're starting to select work, and we have a manager that is pushing a piece of work that really doesn't make sense and wants it done. Then we can structure the meeting to have people say, for instance, present the work that they think should bubble up, and then tell the group why they think that work is important. So invite the manager. Yeah, sure, we can do that piece if you want. Again, what goal does it support, and what number is it going to move? And we're more than happy to do it, even if it doesn't make sense. You might want to go ahead and do it anyway. But the person who's pushing that piece of work will have to you know, t- talk about why they feel it's important. And at least you're starting to have that conversation in a non-confrontational way. So
Yeah.
hopefully that answers your question.
I know we're getting really close to 12:30. So
Yep.
we're just gonna briefly go over. I think we have gone over these four items quite a bit. Um, so we're just gonna go straight to the end. Talk a little bit about if you want to learn more. We're gonna send these recording to everyone that's here, and also people who couldn't join. We're gonna send it to you. So we have some workshops, we have some training if you like. And as well, just we want to open any questions you may have. If you have any questions we can't answer right now, feel free to just message me or Wayne on LinkedIn. We love to answer any questions you have and get back to you as soon as possible. And here is the link I was promising as well. If you take the survey, you have a chance to win that ticket. Would love to, if you would like to get some education, you can use it for education credits and such not.
Okay. Yeah, sure. And don't forget to take that survey. It's going into a global state of OKR usage. It will be compiled in a report coming out in the fall. You'll get a copy of the report and see your contribution to it. So I think that's it. We want to thank everybody for attending today. And if we got any questions, we can stick around for a few minutes to answer them. But it looks like that's it.
Yeah, you can stop
Yeah.
recording.